All the pressure's off. I don't have to ask a single question.
Hey there, guys. Welcome to
My house.
For those of you who don't know, Jessica is a prison reform advocate, huge YouTube sensation. Yeah, I'm really excited to interview you at your own house and ask you a little bit about mental health in prison and just kind of about your own story.
Well, thank you for having me here in the internet world. You can ask me whatever you want. I don't think people really understand what it's like for women in prison, so unless you've been through it.
Well, and that's the thing, as someone who has been incarcerated, I thought this would be really cool because I've heard there are so many differences between men's prison facilities, women's prison facilities, so I think it'd be really cool for us to be able to talk about that and really see how it differs, especially since you were dealing with pregnancy, and that alone has to take a huge toll on your mental health.
I have been incarcerated quite a few times, and my last one, I found out I was pregnant a couple of weeks after I was in this jail. So I was very early in my pregnancy. I was probably estimate about 3 to 4 weeks along when I was arrested, and I found out a couple weeks later. So that was a shock. I'm like, I'm going to prison, but how do I go to prison pregnant? So it was a really tough journey for me.
Now, when you went in initially, did you have any mental health diagnoses?
Mm-hmm. At that point, I had been diagnosed with depression, and that was really the only diagnosis that I had. And I was diagnosed with depression, 18, 19 years old maybe. And the only reason I got that diagnosis was because I was on parole and I was court ordered to go to therapy and drug and alcohol. Yep. So that's where they diagnosed me.
And then now, do you have any additional diagnoses?
Yes. So now I am diagnosed with PTSD. And what falls under that is my chronic insomnia as well. So I will wake up in the middle of the night pouring in sweat. Going to sleep is kind of a struggle. Staying asleep is a struggle. But yeah, my recovery has changed over time. My mental health has changed over time. My PTSD is directly related to having a baby in prison and being chained to the bed and then removed from my 2-day-old baby and thrown back in prison. That's where my trauma comes from. And man, I share a lot on the internet about what that experience was like for me, but directly after my trauma, I don't know what happened. I mean, there's a couple of weeks that are just gone from my memory, but I can try to talk about it the best that I can and answer questions about that specifically if you want to talk about that.
I know for a lot of people, specifically with PTSD, they lose periods of time. And I know stuff like that is really, but specifically during, before we get into like some of the aftermath, can you talk about what was your mental health like when you found out you were pregnant and that you were going to be going through your entire pregnancy in prison?
Complete denial. I did not believe the nurse when she told me that I was pregnant. I was on the pill, but I was also using methamphetamine and I wasn't taking the pill the right way. So I thought, this nurse is crazy. I'm not pregnant. Like, who gets pregnant and goes to prison? Not me. Okay, I was absolutely pregnant, but my brain was trying to detox from drugs. My brain was trying to comprehend the fact that I was in Arkansas and I'm from New York. I was 1,300 miles away from home in a state that is very hard on drug addicts, on a state that did not understand substance use disorder at all. I was in a county jail that didn't offer me medically assisted treatment to help me detox off of meth and pills at the time. And I was basically just left in this cell alone to deal with detoxing and to deal with mental health by myself. So then you add pregnancy and it's like, oh my God, is there anything else you could possibly throw at me?
Let's think of any way we can make the situation worse.
Pregnant.
Yeah.
So I eventually came to terms with all of it. Once I sobered up, I had been there a couple of months and I started to realize, like, you are gaining all this weight directly in your uterus. So that is a baby. So I wrapped my head around all of this and I got on the phone around Christmas and called my mom and told her I'm pregnant. And I'm probably not going to see the light of day for a really long time, because in December of 2011, I was arrested in October. December, the offer on the table was 20 years in prison. So as a New Yorker, that means 20 years, or just under that. You know, you serve like 85% in New York. Arkansas is very different, but you hear 20 years, you think 20 years.
Yeah.
And my mom was just beside herself. So I eventually had to fight for prenatal vitamins. The jail didn't offer them. I had to beg them, and I didn't get them until about 3 months along in my pregnancy. So that was a struggle. I didn't have access to clean water. I was not hydrated. I was not sleeping well. I was very anxious, very nervous, very fidgety. I couldn't sit still. I was constantly like this because I was a meth addict coming down off meth. I hadn't slept for ever before I got there, and I was so uncomfortable, and you could see it because every single second I was just so awkward, and I didn't know what to do with my hands, which is a weird thing to say. Like, you can just put them down. But I didn't know what to do. At no point during my incarceration in the county jail did I receive any mental health help. No help for substance use disorder, no help for my mental health, no counselor came in and explained to me what my body was going through with getting off of drugs, what my brain was going through, how I was making a human life, and how my hormones were changing. I had nothing. First time mom, completely clueless. I was eventually sentenced to 5 years, 15 suspended, 40 years exposure. It essentially means if I commit another crime, I am so fucked. But it's okay. I'm very boring now. So I go to prison, and the only counseling that I get is, do you want to unalive yourself? No, you can go to general population. Like, what? That's it? That's all you're gonna do? And at the prison, this is required in every single facility. You have to have mental health staff on the compound. So I could have filled in a kite and gone to mental health, which I did on a couple of occasions. And what they told me was, you can write about it in this journal.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, how do I write about how to get serotonin? I don't know what to do. Like, I have depression. I'm diagnosed. I'm not okay. Like, so it was a struggle. And then my daughter was born June 12th, 2012. And that is where my PTSD diagnosis comes from. So I gave birth to her. I was chained to the bed. Either my arm was chained, or once she was taken out of me, it's a weird way to say that, my leg was chained to the bed. I was left in that bed for 2 days. The guards didn't want to even unchain me to go to the bathroom. They wouldn't let me walk around so that I could properly heal after having a baby. And 2 days had gone by where I was so awkward with this little beautiful human that I just made that I didn't know how to eat the tray they tried to give me and hold her, and I wouldn't put her down.
Yep.
So the only time I put her down was to change her diaper and try to feed her, but I wouldn't put her down to try to eat. And my body was depleted. I mean, I just gave birth. So my body is very weak. I'm very frail. I haven't gotten up to move around a lot. So my body is just really, really weak. The guards came in to get me, to take me back to prison, and my daughter was going to be placed in foster care. Now, I had 9 months to prepare for this. By myself, though. I had no help from counselors whatsoever. And I didn't want to leave her, so they kind of grabbed me and threw me down in this wheelchair. But they threw me in this wheelchair because I didn't want to leave this baby.
Yeah.
I was going to kill for this baby. And mama bear instincts is a really cutesy term for I'll kill you.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I had no idea that, like, mama bear instincts were so real that I was dead ass going to fight these guards to stay with my baby. Now, I wasn't thinking clearly, obviously. I thought, I need to stay with this baby. I can't just leave her in this room. But they whooshed me out of this hospital after they chained me up, and they took my body, my very weak body, and threw it into this prison transport van and took me back to the prison. And I left my 2-day-old newborn baby in this hospital room. I didn't know where she was going. I didn't know if she was okay. I didn't know what was happening. And they took me back into Sallyport, and this is where my memory is just gone. Sallyport is the back of the prison where inmates go through. The guards, I think, were trying to ask me questions, and I couldn't speak. I mean, like, I had the ability to speak.
Yeah.
But I couldn't really
process it.
Yeah, and I couldn't hear them. I think they were trying to go through the stuff the hospital discharged me with. But again, it's just so gone. And the next thing I remember, I woke up in the infirmary, not really aware of why I was there or what happened. And I felt my stomach, and it was completely flat. And I realized, like, she's gone. I stayed in the infirmary for probably about 2 weeks before something in me just clicked. Get out of this bed. Sign up for classes. Get out of the infirmary. Go back to GP. You have to fight for your daughter. What the hell are you doing? Just get out of here. At no point during the 2 weeks that I was in the infirmary did counselors come and talk to me. Not that I remember. I went back to GP and there was no counseling after that whatsoever. So imagine going through that alone. Just alone in a room by yourself in this prison, and you don't really know why you're there, and you finally realize, oh my gosh, I was pregnant, I had a baby, and she's gone. That was a really hard thing to digest.
For you to have to go through something like you said as a first-time mom, are there things they could do to make that experience less traumatic? Obviously, what they did with you was insane. It blows my mind. The thing that bothers me the most, I think, where you talk about being chained down, I literally said this to one of my friends when I was telling him about your story. I said, what is she going to do? Run away while she's giving birth?
I mean, I had an epidural. I was basically paralyzed for quite a long time. It's just bad policy is why I was chained to the bed. The chains were removed while I was pushing. And the guard that was with me initially was really kind to me. And then when shift change happened, another woman came in and grabbed my leg and chained me. It's just bad policy. The policy clearly states if an inmate is out of the facility and they're in the free world, if they're at a hospital or a doctor's appointment, a dentist office, they don't care. It doesn't matter. They have to be shackled and restrained. And the officers can get into trouble if I wasn't restrained. So it's not necessarily the officer's fault as it is the policy that they have to follow. But what can they do so women don't have to go through this? And I am not the first woman that has gone through this. I have not been the last since my daughter was born, and that is gut-wrenching. The first thing that you can do is not incarcerate pregnant women on nonviolent drug charges.
Yeah.
Number one, you can put them on house arrest, but let them carry their pregnancy to term. That prison's not going anywhere. And if they have to serve prison time on nonviolent drug charges, which I don't think they should, let her have the baby at home first, set up means for this child, let them have 6 weeks together, and then, which is the bare minimum, it's the bare minimum, allow that bonding experience to happen, because you're essentially hurting this child when you're taking away the sound and the smell of its mom, and you're taking away the only comfort that they know. And it's very stressful for the mother as well. Allow them to have time, and then if she must be put in prison, let her serve her time after that happens. But if you're going to incarcerate pregnant women, you have to have a nursery program for them. Yep. Because it's so unbelievably disgusting and traumatic to rip mothers and newborn babies apart. What you need to do is have nursery programs. So Indiana has a nursery program, New York has a nursery program. More states are starting to realize, holy shit, this is barbaric.
Yeah.
And they're starting to change the policy, but every single state needs to follow suit.
Now, specifically about the aftercare, what do you think they could do better to implement there? Should there be required meetings with psychiatrists? Should there be, the ability to speak to a psychiatrist at the very least? Like, what do you think they could do or need to do to implement that?
It's a good question. So to take myself out of it, if you are sentenced with life in prison, you are required to see a psychiatrist. They actually hold you, I think in a lot of facilities, they'll hold you for 24 hours on suicide watch, and they'll require you to speak to a counselor before they release you to GP, because that is a very heavy thing that you just got sentenced with. So why are we not requiring pregnant women to see counselors? I didn't know enough to ask to go. I don't want to say that I didn't deserve to go to prison. I don't want to deflect responsibility and blame. I was breaking the law. I deserve to go to prison. I am a violent offender. So when I say non-violent drug offenders shouldn't be placed in prison, I'm not talking about me. I have an assault charge. I have a gun charge. That's violent. I deserve to go. I was a drug dealer. I didn't deserve my trauma though, and that is the difference. So I think that if we incarcerated less people, half are serving time on nonviolent drug offenses, that will clear up a lot of money and resources to helping not with just psychology and mental health, but job training and job placement programs, which will curb recidivism by so much. So there's, when we're talking about corrections, it's a layered problem. A lot of people are in prison because of their mental health.
Yep.
I didn't meet very many evil people.
There are literally more people in prison that are in need of mental health facilities and recovery facilities than there are that actually need to be there. And I stand by that. If you go to prison or jail, the people you meet are people that are either A, struggling with some sort of addiction, or B, struggling with some sort of mental health diagnosis.
Or both.
or both.
We have the data to prove that prison does not work in the space that we believe prisons should be run. Like, we know that what we're doing is causing traumatic experiences. We're abusing people, we're hurting people, we're disconnecting them from society. And the first thing about addiction is that when you disconnect someone from their support system and the people that love them and care for them, and when you disconnect them from society, it hurts them. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. So when you further isolate addicts, their addiction gets worse. And we know that that's true. We know that our prison system in America is failing. It's not just failing the person that's in prison, it's a generational problem. So there's just so many things that we need to do, but the first thing that we need to do is end the war on drugs. Now, I'm not saying legalize drugs, I'm saying decriminalize drugs. So there's not going to be like a cocaine store. I think people don't understand that. So
yeah, just not making it criminal offenses.
They shouldn't punish you for putting things inside of your own body. They should help you with treatment or let you go, because prison does not help. And of course there are stories like mine where I got sober and that started in prison. But every single prison in America has drugs.
What?
I could have
Since when?
I could have decided to go the other way. I decided to get sober, or work a life of recovery. Prison doesn't get credit for that. Prison gets credit for my trauma, not my recovery.
I don't think a lot of people realize that it's probably easier to get drugs in jail and prison than it is on the outside.
Yeah.
You don't have to look far for someone getting rid of drugs in jail or prison. And that's one thing that I hear a lot of people say. They're like, oh, send these addicts to jail because then they can get recovery. And I'm like, no, then they have easier access to drugs.
Put us all together, we're going to find a way to get drunk. We're going to find a way to get pills. And unfortunately, I just did a video on my channel about a prison being shut down because of corruption. There were pounds of meth in it.
Yep.
Like 1,000 cell phones. Like, it was just crazy. Under Armour, which is clutch, and I'm kind of jealous. So when we're talking about corruption in prison, it's so widespread, and I don't think people get it. Like,
no.
You might have one or two bad corrections officers in every single facility, but at the end of the day, it's essentially up to the inmate to get sober.
Yep.
We're by ourselves. They can have, like, there are treatment programs inside of prison, but they're not good. They literally just preach a path of abstinence, which doesn't work for everyone. And their treatment plan is so dated. They're not current on medically assisted treatment. They're not current with the research on, cannabis and recovery. They really don't understand holistically addiction and how that correlates to mental health. They're just like, don't do drugs, okay? Promise. Like,
don't do it.
Bro, my addiction is because of my mental health, and I was self-medicating, and a lot of us are, but there are not medical professionals in prisons teaching people about mental health and substance use disorder. It's usually inmate-run programs, and they just hand out packets, and they're like, okay, sorry, you were traumatized, don't do drugs.
That's the other thing about, like, specifically being incarcerated with mental health issues. Unless women's facilities are different, I think you could also verify you don't want to go to where they bring people that are struggling with mental health. When I was having schizophrenic episodes, the people around me made sure that when the guards came, they were like, nope, he's fine. They didn't want me to have to get put into a psychiatric facility or on a psychiatric hold. So they were always just really good about making sure that when I was struggling, I wasn't put somewhere where I would receive even worse care.
I want you to think about what he said. The inmates had to protect him from the staff who would take him out of that facility, place him on suicide watch, or put him in psychiatric facilities. The inmates had to protect him. And I think that is so common. If I was having suicidal thoughts, which I struggle with, and I have had suicide attempts in my past, if I was struggling with that in a facility, they would strip me naked,
Yep.
put me in a turtle suit, and I would be alone in this padded room with nothing, and they would watch me, just stare at me, and just make sure I wasn't going to unalive myself. Can you imagine how my health would tank after that happened to me? So I never told staff that I was struggling, and I always was afraid to do that because you're punished. They physically have to keep your body alive. And if you want to unalive your own body, they will physically make sure that you can't.
The downside to that is that no one is going to come forward with a plea for help, knowing that it'll be taken worse than if they just tough it out and try to get through without it. I want to thank you so much for sharing that. I know that's so hard to share with people. Your platform and what you're doing for prison reform and everything is amazing. I'm glad to be able
Mediocre.
to. It's amazing. Hope to see that, you know, this continues to go in the way that you're constantly working towards. And obviously, when it comes to mental health and prison, I love having these conversations with you. I would love to do this again sometime because there's so much more that we could unpack here that we didn't even get into
We filmed
today.
for days about this. I mean, it really is just such a complex issue, and prison reform is something that we're gonna have to fight for forever because this is the United States of America. Most people are in local and state jails. So while it is important to vote at the federal level for politicians that run on platforms of changing the prison system, it's also important to vote local. And to really pay attention to governors when they're talking about what they're going to do for the jails in their area. So it's a big ship. It's going to take a long time to turn this big ship, but you know, it starts with conversations, and then it starts with voting and getting out there. And if you want to donate to jails or facilities, there's a period product issue in women's facilities. Call your state and local jails and say, hey, can I donate tampons and pads? Can I donate books? Can I donate notebooks? So if you want to get involved with prison reform, make some phone calls and see what you can do in your area.
And where can the people find you?
Jessica Kent on YouTube. It's a very mediocre channel, but there it is.
It's not mediocre. Well, thank you so much for letting me take up your space and your time here. Make sure to check out Jessica. Also, if you guys have any questions about what we went through today, whether it be mental health, whether it be women's prisons, please leave them below. Let us know what you'd like to see the next time we meet up and do one of these videos. Everyone take it easy. Have a good one.